The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. Amanda Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocast on hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want Bizong leggings? Wait, are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden, and Brian, I say a very early morning Excelsior to you.
Excelsior to you, my friend. We are recording earlier than we normally do, and that's my fault, and I appreciate you accommodating me. But it's for a good cause, because today, Chris, much like we did with the entire run of Marvel's Defenders, we wrap up the entire run of Marvel's The Champions.
We do, and I think let's cover Champions 17, and then we can cover in general the stuff that wraps up afterwards, the Spectacular Spider-Man issues, and let's just cover this, and then I want to talk about what a shame the way the Champions wraps up is. But so let's first go through this issue. Champions
I agree.
17, written by Bill Mantlo, art by the returning George Tuska with John Byrne as embellisher, which I imagine in this case is not just inker but probably finisher as well.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, this is to my knowledge, because I didn't really become aware of Byrne until X-Men and later Fantastic Four.
Right.
To the best of my knowledge, this is the only time I've seen Tuska and Byrne on pencils together, and oh my God, I want them to draw everything.
Yeah.
Really, really good team.
Yeah, no, it looks great, and it's an interesting, great cover, by the way. The cover is the Sentinels attacking the Champions, and although I don't like the Ghost Rider on the cover, the Hercules on the cover is great.
Yeah.
It's really good. I think, Hercules is a character that deserves a little bit more attention, I feel.
He's gotten a little bit more. As a matter of fact, I wanted to find a way to bring this up on the show.
Okay.
So Mary and I, of course, we religiously watch Family Guy. It's our favorite show. And this past week's episode of Family Guy, all season they've been joking about the fact that Fox has been purchased by Disney, and now they can do all these Disney crossovers on Family Guy.
Yeah.
And Peter says, well, this gives us an excuse to bring in Hercules. What? Oh, we can't use him? Well, I thought we were owned by Disney and Marvel now. What was the point of that merger if they won't use him?
That's funny.
So, a little love from Family Guy for Marvel's other god,
Yeah. Exactly. That's what, literally, that should be the subtitle if they ever do a new series. Hercules, Marvel's other god.
There you go.
No, so in any case, it's a weird issue, and it speaks to everything that we're going to see in this sort of petering out, which is the only way I can describe what happens to the Champions now.
Right.
Basically, the Blob, Unis the Untouchable, and what is her name? Lorelei.
Lorelei from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Yes, members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. burst into Champions headquarters, which apparently has no security whatsoever. And Black Widow and Hercules are there. And then we get this fantastic double-page spread of the Sentinels smashing through the wall, to the shock and surprise of all of these characters.
Right. Now, for our younger listeners, or those who were never fans of the X-Men, the Sentinels, because they never showed up in the pages of Defenders or Gargoyle or any of the other things we covered. Right. The Sentinels are giant robots designed to hunt mutants.
Right.
That's pretty much all you got to know.
Yeah, they're designed to counter the powers of mutants and all kinds of stuff. And so basically what's happening here is that the Sentinels have arrived. They're able to cancel out the powers of the 3 mutants that they're hunting, but that does not mean that Hercules and Black Widow can't fight them.
That's right. Hercules warns the Sentinels. He says, "Have a care, robot. 'Twill go hard with thee if thou darest to command."
You know what? I feel like the next time somebody wants to punch you in the jaw, you should lead with that line.
I say, "Have a care, robot."
Twill go hard for you. Yeah, I feel like that's a thing. You need that T-shirt, in fact.
I do. What I like here with what Bill Mantlo does, the Sentinels just completely ignore him, and that pisses him off.
Yeah, they don't like that.
And Hercules decides because they're ignoring him, honor now demands that he enter the fray. So he leaps into battle. Black Widow follows him, and the two of them start battling the Sentinels. And then, Chris, we get to, again, Mantlo just kept throwing stuff at the wall. We get this weird segment that apparently Champions headquarters has been able to do this all along, but we don't see it until issue 17.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about it. The Champions signal is that their entire building is lit up like an office building. Every window is lit, but when the alert goes off, the appropriate windows go dark to create the darkened image of the Champions C.
Right.
Which is not effective if the other champions are not within visible range of Champions Tower. So I thought that was clever, but doesn't hold up to much, ponderance.
No.
Anyway, then another member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants shows up. So you have the Vanisher, who is peering around the... Wait, is that the Vanisher?
Yeah, it is the Vanisher.
Yeah, peering around the corner. All right. Then we come to Angel, who's flying around. Angel has noticed the signal, thankfully, because, of course, the other members of the Champions have not.
Right, and that is because Johnny Blaze is doing a show in Los Angeles. Now, again, it was the 70s. Johnny Blaze's character was, of course, inspired by the real life
Evel Knievel.
Motorcycle daredevil, Evel Knievel. So Johnny's doing a stunt show in L.A. Bobby and Darkstar are in the crowd, and it looks like they're actually on a date. So after 17 issues, something's finally happening here between these two characters. We've seen it hinted at, just like we've seen it hinted, about Johnny Blaze and Black Widow, the animosity between Iceman and Ghost Rider, etc. Mantlo's finally starting to build on all that. Unfortunately, it's the last issue of the book.
Yeah. So basically, Iceman and Darkstar are there in the line waiting for the event to begin. Trouble starts between Iceman. Well, when they see Angel in the sky, Iceman ices up. Then we have some anti-mutant Trumpers. Fascists in the line who attack Iceman and think that he's a quote-unquote mutie, which I think in today's terms, and I do not say this in any mocking fashion, would probably be called the M word.
Oh yeah,
that's the impression that the writers of this era were giving, was that Muty was that sort of racial epithet.
Exactly.
So Johnny Blaze comes out and turns into Ghost Rider, and they fight with the crowd, and there's and then of course there's this line from a bystander that I feel like is in almost every Marvel comic every Marvel team comic in the 70s. Cripes, they're coming out of the woodwork. Am I wrong?
Right.
Am I wrong about that? What would be really funny is if you flipped back through like every Marvel like team comic in the 70s and early 80s to look for that line and found that it was the same guy.
Well, I remember it being used in ROM,
Yep.
which Bill Mantlo wrote, Micronauts, which Bill Mantlo wrote.
Yep.
I think I remember Ben Grimm, the Thing, uttering it in Marvel 2-in-1. I'd be curious if Mantlo wrote that issue.
But it would be great if you went back and the art it showed that it was actually the same character.
That would be really funny.
Anyway,
but yeah, that we then get, again, the antagonism between Iceman and Ghost Rider. Iceman accuses Johnny Blaze of staging this entire racist encounter to, I don't know, I guess to promote his show or something.
Yeah.
Ghost Rider gets rightfully pissed off.
Yeah.
But before they can fight, Angel swoops down and says, we got trouble at Champion's headquarters, and they all go racing off.
And I would like to point out, though, that unlike every other instance of this, see, Darkstar can fly, folks. Angel can fly. Iceman can't. So in this instance, when Angel picks up Iceman off the ground, the next panel you see is Iceman riding Angel like he's a Pegasus.
Yes.
And it's just the silliest thing I've seen in a long time. Giddy up, Angel!
So we then go back to Champion's headquarters, where the fight with the Sentinels is underway. The rest of the champions arrive.
Let me interrupt you, Brian, for 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
To back to the previous page, and just want to point out that the Tuska Burn Ghost Rider looks great.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Yeah, looks great. We've seen issues with Ghost Rider in this series, but in this issue, it's great. Go ahead.
Well, and that's the thing with Ghost Rider, and I think as much as I enjoy Nicolas Cage's passion for the character, I don't think this is his fault. I think where the movies failed, Ghost Rider is a creature from hell. It's the demon Zarathos. Mm-hmm. And they either depict him that way or they depict him as, a scary guy with a flaming skull mask. Some artists get it right, some don't. I don't think the movies got it right either. I don't think they played up the horror element of the character. But yeah, Tuska and Byrne really capture. I mean, you look in the eyes in this one close-up panel.
Yeah.
That's a scary. It reminds me of what Steve Bissette would do later on Swamp Thing. So, but yeah, the battle is underway. Everybody's punching each other. They defeat the Sentinels, and then we get a call back. You'll remember in last week's episode, we talked about the last time we saw the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants was in Defender 16, and they all got turned into babies. Eric the Red restored Magneto. We talked about that last episode. When he did, he also restored the rest of the Brotherhood. That's why the Blob and Eunice and Lorelei are all adults again.
Yeah. And every time you say the words, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants were turned into babies, that's a story we need in the modern Marvel universe. We need a team turned into babies. Anyway. And then Angel points out that the fact that they came running to the champions is phony. Angel just doesn't buy it. And Iceman agrees, and Unus continues the bullshit, but then he knows that the jig is up, and they attack. They attack the champions. This, Brian, seems like a very, very convoluted way to just end up fighting the champions. Like, why did they need the Sentinels at all?
Well, because they needed Iceman and Angel are such a force to be reckoned with. They needed to catch them off guard, I guess.
Okay. Well, then we have an argument between the Vanisher and the other members of the Brotherhood over who gets to claim the credit for defeating the champions. Somehow the Vanisher has stolen and reprogrammed these particular Sentinels. And then we get background. And I think the point here, if I'm remembering my read correctly, is that the defeat of Angel and Iceman, they hope, will lure the other X-Men.
Yeah.
And then we get, Brian, okay. I'm overcome by this situation with Darkstar.
You have been for the entire
because in this issue, we get the impression that Darkstar does indeed know more about herself and her powers than she has let on before. And in fact, it says the unexplained power that is the Dark Force ripples from weak fingers, empowering the unliving with destructive life. So basically, she's able to use the Dark Force to resurrect and control the Sentinels to get them to attack the Brotherhood. And there's an implication that that her powers are alien.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I can't find the line now that I'm looking at it, but I remember,
Which, if I remember correctly, because as I said, she features into the pages of the Hulk a couple of years after this. If I remember correctly, I do believe it is some sort of alien explanation. You remember the supervillain group, the UFOs?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it ties in with them, and I can't remember. I'd have to go back, and I haven't read those since I was a teenager. But yeah, I do think it's eventually
we will report back in the next episode so that at least our listeners are not left hanging with the mystery of Darkstar. So in any case, so she says here, the Vanisher says, there is no one living who can stop me. And Darkstar says, no human perhaps, but Darkstar is more than human, much more. And she stops him halfway between this world and vanishing into another. And then she collapses into Iceman's arms with Bobby hold me. Angel says, did you hear what she said about not being human? And Hercules says, aye, lad, in truth, there is a mystery here. And Widow says, but what can we do now? And then the caption box says, a very good question, Widow, but it's one which will be answered in a future issue of the Avengers.
But it wasn't.
But it never was.
And thus we come to the end.
Let me say this. It hasn't yet been.
Yeah.
There's still time. The Avengers is still being published.
And that's it. And it's rare. It's rarer than you think that this happens in comics. Comics get canceled all the time.
Right.
But usually the writer knows. The writing's on the wall, and they can wrap. I'll give you a very good current example. Our dear friend Keith Giffen and another friend of mine, Jeff Lemire, they've been doing the Inferior Five for DC. It was originally supposed to be 12 issues, and Keith had plotted out 12 issues. Well, it didn't sell well. DC's canceling it after issue 6. But Keith knew that ahead of time, and he was able to wrap things up. Right. It's very clear here that Mantlo thought, maybe we'll make it to issue 25 or something. And nope, the carpet gets pulled out from under him.
Right.
you know, and oh yeah, we're gonna wrap it up in the Avengers later. No, it never happened.
Yeah, well, and that's it. I mean, clearly he had done this issue. The issue had been completed. It was canceled, and the editors are the ones who put in that this will be answered in a future issue of the Avengers at the bottom. And this is what I wanted to talk about. And maybe rather than go through beat by beat, we can sort of sum up the petering out of the champions, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you know, these days, as you just described, most of the time when these things are going to end, whether they know it in advance or they construct arcs, knowing that things get canceled on a regular basis, so that there will be a sort of natural conclusion that will at least be somewhat satisfying to the audience. Television series used to do this to us all the time, Brian.
Right.
Where like all of a sudden a show would air for 5 episodes and get canceled, or it would, it would be on for 3 seasons and then not come back, and the creators had no idea it wasn't coming back. Now, usually, they have some sense that they are in jeopardy, and so they will build in a sort of false ending just in case they don't come back. But in these days, you had this, and what's really disappointing about it is that what happens after is the champions don't, continue to exist.
Right.
They could have gone on in the background of the Marvel Universe, but instead we get these 2 issues of Peter Parker, 17 and 18 of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. And go ahead, I'm babbling.
Yeah, and I don't know that we need to go through blow by blow, but Mantlo, of course, Mantlow's the writer. Sal Buscema and David Hunt are the artists. It's always a joy for me to see Sal's artwork. He's my favorite Bronze Age artist.
Yeah.
But we find Peter Parker in Los Angeles. He's on assignment, and it's sometime after the champions have broken up, and he's outside Champions Plaza, and all of a sudden some windows break off, and they're going to the ground, and we see Angel peer out of the building. He says, "Oh no, it's happening again!" And he flies down, and he stops the glass from killing Peter Parker, and they meet up and they're talking, and Angel reveals what happened after the end of Champion 17.
Right, and this is the part that we really should discuss.
Exactly,
because it's the forced separation of the champions.
Exactly.
There's no indication in the final panels of Champion 17 that the team is about to break up. And yet, we have this couple of pages where, basically they got their asses handed to them. And Angel rightly says that the Sentinels got through all of our defenses. Nothing worked. Bobby says nothing has, not since the day this place was built. Brian jump in with Hercules' line.
Truly, 'tis as if this very building were our foe. And Ghost Rider sums up what I feel like we've been saying for 17 issues.
Yep.
We spend all our time defending it, meaning the headquarters.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to talk about that particular line and that whole panel as I think the summary of why the champions failed. Because for a while it was actually really interesting. And, people make fun of it, but it was actually, I think, a pretty good book. But then all of a sudden it got to this point where it was just chasing its tail, where it didn't know what it wanted to be. There was no place in this story at a certain point for Ghost Rider. They never used him or his character or his personal story in any, sort of useful way. And he was off screen so much of the time because they didn't know what to do with him. They introduced Dark Star. She was really interesting. They didn't follow her up. So once you get to, a certain point, like to me, you have this headquarters, and all of a sudden it became so much about the headquarters and nothing working and it constantly failing and all of that kind of stuff. They just didn't, it was just like there was no idea what to do with these characters or this book.
Right.
And so it was very unfortunate. And in this case, the backstory is that the champions broke up at that point. And we have a very whiny Ghost Rider.
Yeah, he says, I've grown tired of fighting for this pile of bricks, and none of you want me here. And Black Widow tries to say that's not true. And it's very telling here. Hercules recognizes Ghost Rider for what he is. He says, perhaps 'tis best that the demon go. The demon. He doesn't call him Johnny.
Yeah.
He doesn't call him Ghost Rider. He calls him Demon.
Yeah.
Black Widow also uncharacteristically, she falls into Hercules' arms, crying against his chest, saying, it's all my fault as the team leader. That's not Black Widow.
No, not at all. I was just like, I saw that panel and I was like, what? I just, no. Anyway.
And then Darkstar fucks off to Russia, and
then again, not only does Darkstar fuck off to Russia, but Darkstar basically says we're too disparate a group to remain united for long. Basically, I'm going to take off, and Bobby says, "Lania, what are you saying?" And she says she's going to go home to Russia, and he says, "But I love you. You can't." And she's like, "Bobby, you know what? I like you, but it was never more than that." And she just leaves, and first of all, it's just typical Bobby Drake, right? We've seen that. But then Angel tries to comfort him. Iceman is pissed. He goes storming off, and then Angel's like, go ahead.
Yeah, Angel turns to Hercules and Black Widow, and they're like, nope, we're leaving too. Hercules wants to roam the earth, and Black Widow's going to accompany him for a time. Yeah. Because I guess, and I say this with all due respect, but this is the way they wrote the character in the 70s. She's bouncing back and forth between Daredevil and Hawkeye. Mm-hmm. Now she's hooking up with Hercules. It's some unfortunate.
And also Tony Stark
And Tony Stark. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to the champions. I don't know that we need to recap the rest.
I think I can sort of sum up the plot because it is champions related. The plot of these two issues is that Rampage, our former champions villain Rampage, Stuart Clark, who's now all bandaged and in a wheelchair, he has essentially kidnapped Iceman and done some mind control on Iceman. So he's controlling him, and Iceman is now in the Rampage costume.
That's right.
And if Angel doesn't do Stuart Clark's bidding, then he will kill Iceman.
Right. Now remember, the Rampage costume is, a knockoff of Tony Stark's Iron Man armor.
Yeah, it's an
exoskeleton. Basically what we have here is Iron Iceman.
Yes. Until the end of the issue, at which point Iceman destroys the costume by icing out of it, but he's still being mind controlled. And in issue 18, it's Iceman versus Angel and Spider-Man. And, Iceman is basically trying to kill them. And we get just another short recap of the dissolution of the champions. We get the explanation for how Iceman came to be in this position. And again, we get more fight. There's not a lot to it. Even as a Spider-Man fan, it's not that it's not entertaining. It is. And I guess the only thing that is pertinent to the champions, aside from what we just said in this, Brian, is toward the end of the issue, we find that Angel is interrupted by the contractors who built this headquarters for him, and the owners of the property. And basically, they're trying to intimidate him or do something. And he gets pissed off enough that they promise that they're going to cancel all his debts, rent the property, and repair the whole building free of charge.
Right.
Which wraps up the mystery of the headquarters that has turned against them.
And it wraps up our coverage of the champions. However, there are two more champions-related stories that we will be covering on the show. The first is Incredible Hulk number 7. Now, we're not going to cover it next week. We're going to save that for when we need to do a fill-in episode. But what I like about Incredible Hulk Annual number 7 not only is it a fine denouement to the champions, but it leads in to Angel and Iceman joining the Defenders.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say as well. Yep.
Yeah, you know, we see what would become Defenders headquarters with them. You know, so we'll be looking at that, you know, in a future episode. Also, we mentioned that the champions guest star in an issue of Marvel's Godzilla. We will be covering that when we cover Godzilla.
Yeah.
Which will be in January, January 2020. So 2 months away. We'll be, you know, of course, next week we'll be. Actually, we might get to Godzilla before January because we're doing Black Goliath next week. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
And I figure that's going to take 1 or 2 episodes at the most.
Yep, couple episodes. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, look forward to that. And Chris, before we head out, I do want to mention because we haven't for a few episodes, you know, our dear friends, author Jim Moore and podcast engineer Dave Thomas. They're both fighting cancer right now. They both have GoFundMe's available. Both of them are winning, but unfortunately, you know, in that fight and winning that fight, it takes a lot out of them, and neither of them can work right now. You know, so they could use your help. If you go to GoFundMe.com, in the search bar there, just type in James A. Moore or type in Dave Thomas, and their individual GoFundMes will pop up. You know, if you enjoy this show every week, it's free. Chris and I do it for free. We don't make any money off this. That's not a complaint. That's just to tell you we love doing this. We love bringing.
Yeah, we're doing it for our own amusement.
Yeah. So, you know, if we've amused you, you know, if you can give those guys just $5, if each of our listeners gave them $5, they'd each have $25. But
oh, we're up to 5. That's fantastic. Yeah, no, I think that's great, Brian. I'm glad you brought that up because it is an ordeal. You know, in Jim's case, for instance, you know, they just told him they're giving him 2 additional weeks of radiation, not re-upping, but just sort of continuing. So, you know, it's a constant series of ordeals going on. But
exactly,
yes, I think they both are winning.
In Dave's case, you know, the chemo and the radiation have just wrecked his immune system.
Yeah.
And you know, it's I guess January they're taking out his entire stomach, like, or maybe it's next month. I know it's like right after Christmas they're taking out his stomach, but you know, his immune system has to recuperate before they can do that. So it's a mess.
Yeah, no, it's you know, again, not to be you know. But it is, and this week is Thanksgiving, so I give thanks that our friends are still with us. That's
right.
And I give thanks not to lessen the impact of that statement. I give thanks for our ability to spend an hour or so every week talking about the nonsense we loved as children, and complaining about the dissolution of the champions and all that.
It's the only bright point of my week.
And I'm really looking forward to talking about Black Goliath. And Brian, I guess I should confess now that I am going to debut for you next week. I'm going to debut my Black Goliath T-shirt.
Oh, excellent!
Which will be the envy of all.
Well, make sure you go to YouTube, folks, and like the Brian Keene channel there, and you will be the first to see Chris in all his Black Goliath glory.
All right, on that note, I say Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior to you, my friend. We'll see you next week, folks.
You're listening to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
Anything moist. You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it.
God damn it.
I'd
be going down on myself?
Shit. Hey guys, it's Bill,
Mick,
Maya,
and Junior
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows.
Three guys with beards: Jim Moore, Jonathan Maybar, and Chris Golden.
Tom Clark from Necrocast Igborn.
Brian Keene of The Horror Show. Chuck Buda. And Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method.
Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans.
Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith.
John Urbansick of Ink Stains.
Bizung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.